Hey young friends, Dr. Bill here. I certainly hope that you're doing really well, and I am so glad that you could join me for today's lesson. Today we're continuing a look at big names from the Bible, and we're finishing up with the last big name from the book of Judges. Now I hope you recall from our previous lessons that the book of Judges is all about judges, not the kind of judge we think in a court of law, but leaders who were raised up to meet a particular crisis or a particular threat at different points in time in the life of the Hebrew people. They were special leaders for special moments. Today we're taking a look at Samson. He's the last really big name in the book of Judges. There are a couple of things, or a few things, that I'd like to tell you about Samson. First, in the book of Judges, his is the only story that we have that describes him from the moment he was born until the moment he died. Most of the other judges, when we read their stories, we pick up their stories when they're adults, or only when the crisis occurs that requires their leadership. Samson's story, however, is told from the moment he's born until the moment he leaves this life. That kind of stands out. Secondly, when we read his story, we learn that he was a Nazirite. And what that means is that he was separated or set apart for God's service. Before he was born, God spoke to his parents and said, I have something very special in mind for Samson to do. And in order for him to do it, I want you to set him apart for that service. And as a sign of his being set apart, two things happen. First, Samson was never allowed to drink anything alcoholic, no strong drink. Secondly, his hair was never to be cut. So by the time that Samson grew up to be an adult, he had very long hair and a very long beard. And that long hair, that long beard, that was the source of his strength. As long as that remained uncut, Samson would be very strong physically. And from many of the stories in the book of Judges, we learn exactly that. Samson was a very strong person. The last thing I want to mention with regard to him is that the people who were threatening the Hebrew people at that time, when Samson was the judge, well, it was the Philistines. And the Philistines were people who lived on the coast of the Promised Land. And they were threatening the Hebrew people, the children of Israel. And so it was Samson's job to try to figure out how to take the fight to the Philistines and how to defeat them, how to keep them from threatening the Hebrew people. So there's several incidents from Samson's life that I'd like to mention today. The first is that when the Philistines were threatening the people of Israel, Samson decided to attack them. But he attacked them in a very unusual way. He didn't gather a large army. He didn't gather thousands of people to go into war with him. No, Samson captured 300 foxes. And then he took those foxes to where the Philistines lived. And then Samson tied torches to the tails of those foxes and lit them, set them on fire. And then he turned the foxes loose to run through the fields of the Philistines. In this way, Samson set on fire all of the fields, all of the cropland of the Philistines, depriving them of food. This was one way that he fought. The second incident is a time where some Philistines decided they wanted to attack Samson and get him out of the way. They recognized that he was a special person and that he was a threat to them. And so 300 of the Philistines decided to attack Samson. Samson had no weapons, and so he found the jawbone of an ass, the jawbone of a donkey. And Scripture says that he took that jawbone and he did battle with all 300 of those Philistines and defeated them. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Now, as well, we also read that Samson was married to a woman named Delilah. Delilah was the apple of Samson's eye. He loved her very much, but she did not love him very well in return. And so the Philistines decided to approach her, and they made promises to her that if she could find out the secret of Samson's strength, well, they would reward her. And so Delilah kept pushing and probing, trying to get Samson to tell her the secret of his strength. Samson told her a couple of times and misled her, saying, if you do this or if this happens, I won't be strong any longer. And she found out that those things didn't work. She kept pestering Samson and bugging him until finally Samson revealed, hey, if you cut my hair, I will be weak as a kitten. And so one night, while Samson slept, one of the Philistines came in and shaved off all of Samson's hair. And as a result, he lost all of his strength, and the Philistines were able to subdue him. Samson was betrayed by Delilah. Now, the final episode of his life takes place when Samson, having been captured by the Philistines, well, to celebrate, they were having a huge, huge party in one of their grand temples. And they said, let's make fun of Samson. And so they brought him out in his weakened condition, and they chained him up between two of the pillars holding up the roof of that temple. Now, unbeknownst to the Philistines, Samson's hair had begun to grow back, and he was regaining some of his strength. And so in that moment, he prayed to God and said, Lord, you've called me to help defeat the Philistines. I have failed you in many ways, but this one last thing I wish you would grant me. Give me enough strength here and now so that I can defeat the Philistines. Well, Samson mustered up enough strength so that he was able to pull those pillars apart, and he collapsed the roof of that temple, wiping out many Philistines and certainly doing away with many of their leaders, ending the threat for the moment from the Philistines to the Hebrew people. So those are some of the key episodes from Samson's life. Here are some interesting lessons that I think we can take to heart. First, Samson shows us that we must always try to depend on God. Samson's failing was that being so strong, so physically strong, so capable of doing incredible things because of that strength, well, Samson was inclined to trust in himself. He did not always trust God. Instead, he just figured that whatever difficulty he found himself in, he could use his strength to get out of it. And sadly, it's only at the end of his life that he learned that he had to depend on God. Now, most of us are not, just incredibly strong like Samson, and most of us will have moments where life will get pretty hard, pretty tough. And one of the things that we have to learn is that there are moments where we just can't depend on us, on ourselves. Instead, it's in those moments that we have to rely on God, on God's help, on God's strength, and on God's wisdom and guidance. The second thing is this. Samson did not choose wisely the people to whom he trusted his secrets. Now, the truth is, secrets are not always good. Sometimes secrets can be very harmful, and we're better off, instead of keeping secrets, to tell the truth. But some of us, all of us, have secrets. We've done things that we wish others didn't know. We don't want them to know. But every now and then we may say to someone, here's something I'm going to tell you that I've told no one else. Well, Samson's story reminds us of how important it is to tell those kinds of secrets only to people that we trust very, very, very much. Samson's story reminds us that some people will take the secrets we tell and they will use those secrets to do us harm and to hurt us. And so if we do have secrets, better to tell those secrets only to people that we know we can trust and trust completely. The final lesson from Samson's life is this. Even though he failed tremendously by telling the secret of his long hair, being reduced to someone who is very, very weak, Samson learned even then that God would give him a second chance. God allowed Samson to fulfill his calling by giving him the strength that he needed for one last battle against the Philistine people. This is symbolized by the fact that when Samson is taken into that temple of the Philistines, we're told that his hair was beginning to grow back. His strength was beginning to return. And what that suggests is that we're never really done with God, or God is never really done with us. There's always a new opportunity, a second chance, a new way of moving forward because God is gracious. Well, I hope this has been interesting and helpful to you. As always, you can give me a call, send me an email, or flag me after church, and I'll be glad to talk with you about this lesson or any of our other lessons. Until the next time we meet, I wish you well and certainly pray God's blessings on you and your family. Take care. Bye-bye.